The stars had never seemed so threatening until the day they arrived. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the observation room at the International Space Station, her coffee floating forgotten beside her as she stared at the readings on her screen. Something massive had just entered Earth's orbit, and it wasn't supposed to be there. The object was larger than anything humanity had ever put into space. It was roughly the size of Manhattan, dark and angular with surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Are you seeing this?" her colleague Marcus whispered over the communication line. His voice carried from the European Space Agency headquarters in Paris, and Sarah could hear the tremor in it. Within hours, every space agency on Earth confirmed the same impossible truth. An alien vessel sat in high orbit above the planet, and it wasn't alone. Smaller ships, each still larger than any human spacecraft, moved in precise formations around the massive mothership. They made no attempt to hide their presence. In fact, they seemed to want to be seen. The United Nations Emergency Security Council convened within 6 hours of first contact. Leaders from every major nation gathered in New York, their faces projected on screens in the council chamber. President Morrison of the United States sat at the main table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Beside her, representatives from China, Russia, the European Union, and dozens of other nations waited in tense silence. The aliens made them wait 3 days before making contact. When the message finally came, it arrived simultaneously on every communication device on Earth. Televisions, radios, phones, and computers all displayed the same image. The creature on the screen was humanoid, but distinctly alien. Its skin was a pale gray-blue, smooth and almost luminescent. It had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its face, and when it spoke, its mouth revealed rows of small, sharp teeth. "People of Earth," the alien said. Its voice translated into every human language simultaneously. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Vrethian Empire. Your world has been surveyed and catalogued. We have found resources of great value to the Empire. You have 30 of your rotational cycles to evacuate the following territories." A map of Earth appeared on every screen. Large sections of South America, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia were highlighted in red. These regions, the Admiral explained, would be strip-mined for rare elements that the Empire required. The human population in these areas would be relocated to what the Admiral called appropriate habitation zones. "This is not a negotiation," Admiral Kethvar continued. "This is a notification. The Vrethian Empire spans 47 star systems. We have processed 234 worlds. Your cooperation will result in minimal casualties. Resistance will be dealt with according to Imperial protocol." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun. The world erupted into chaos. President Morrison immediately requested a diplomatic channel to the Vrethian ships. Her message was simple and direct. Earth's leaders wanted to negotiate terms, to find a solution that didn't involve the destruction of vast portions of their planet. The response came 12 hours later, and it was brief. Pre-FTL species do not negotiate with the Empire. Comply or face consequences. In military command centers across the globe, generals and admirals studied the alien vessels through every sensor available. The technology gap was enormous. The Vrethian ships moved without visible propulsion, appeared to have energy shields that deflected debris and micrometeorites effortlessly, and showed no signs of vulnerable points. Earth's most advanced spacecraft were crude rockets compared to what orbited overhead. But humanity had faced impossible odds before. General William Zhao of the United Earth Defense Initiative stood before a room full of military leaders in Geneva. He was a tall man with silver hair and a face carved by decades of service. Behind him, a holographic display showed the Vrethian fleet in orbit. "We can't beat them in open combat," he said bluntly. "Our missiles, our aircraft, our naval vessels, everything we have is centuries behind their technology. Maybe millennia. But that doesn't mean we're helpless." He pulled up footage from wars throughout human history. Guerrilla fighters in Vietnam, resistance movements in World War II, insurgents in the Middle East, groups that had faced superior military forces and survived through cunning, adaptation, and sheer stubbornness. "Humans don't surrender easily," General Zhao said. "We need to show them that." The 30-day deadline approached with terrifying speed. Evacuation efforts began in the marked territories, but millions refused to leave. They were farmers, villagers, indigenous peoples who had lived on their lands for generations. They would not be displaced by alien invaders. On day 28, the Vrethian mining drones descended. They appeared in the skies above the Amazon rainforest, massive machines that hummed with alien power. Each drone was the size of a building, with mechanical arms designed to tear into the earth and extract resources. They moved in formation, descending toward the jungle canopy. The Brazilian Air Force scrambled fighters from 3 bases. 12 F-39 Gripen jets screamed through the sky, their pilots knowing they faced an enemy beyond their capabilities, but unwilling to let the invasion go unchallenged. Colonel Ana Santos led the squadron. She was a 15-year veteran, one of the best pilots in the Brazilian military. As her fighter approached the drones, her targeting system struggled to lock on. The alien machines emitted some kind of interference that confused her instruments. "This is Falcon Leader," she transmitted. Engaging the enemy, she fired 2 missiles. They streaked toward the nearest drone, white contrails marking their path through the blue sky. The drone didn't even attempt to evade. A shimmer of energy appeared around it, and the missiles exploded harmlessly against an invisible barrier. "Shields confirmed," Anna reported. Switching to guns, she dove toward the drone, her cannon blazing. Armor-piercing rounds struck the energy shield and vanished in flashes of light. The drone finally reacted. A beam of concentrated energy shot from one of its appendages. The beam moved faster than anything Anna had ever seen. It struck her wingman's fighter dead center. The jet exploded instantly. No ejection, no chance for survival, just a fireball that tumbled toward the jungle below. "Brake! Brake!" Anna shouted, pulling her fighter into a steep climb. Around her, the other pilots scattered. But the drones were tracking them now. More energy beams lanced through the air. Within 90 seconds, 7 of the 12 fighters were destroyed. The remaining 5 retreated, their pilots shaken and their ammunition exhausted. The drones continued their descent, unhindered. Aboard the Vrethian flagship, Admiral Kethvar reviewed the engagement data with satisfaction. His second-in-command, Commander Vesh, stood beside him. "Primitive chemical propulsion," Vesh observed. "Kinetic weapons. No energy shields. Their technology is even more backward than we estimated." "Good," Kethvar replied. "This will be a simple harvest operation. Continue with the mining schedule." But in military bunkers beneath the surface of Earth, human generals were watching the same engagement with different eyes. They had learned valuable information. The drones had shields, but they weren't invincible. They could be tracked. They had limited firing arcs. Most importantly, they could be distracted. General Zhao studied the footage of the destroyed fighters, his jaw tight with anger and sorrow. Those pilots had been brave. They had bought Earth valuable intelligence with their lives. "We can't fight them in the air," he said quietly, "so we won't. We'll fight them on the ground, in the jungles, in the cities, in places where their technology gives them less advantage. We'll make them bleed for every inch of Earth they try to take." Around the world, military forces mobilized. Special operations teams, guerrilla warfare specialists, and soldiers who understood unconventional combat, prepared for a war unlike any in human history. In laboratories, scientists worked frantically to understand the wreckage of previous alien encounters, to find weaknesses in Vrethian technology. In the Amazon, where the drones had landed and begun their destructive work, local militia forces watched from the jungle shadows. They carried rifles, explosives, and centuries of knowledge about how to fight in terrain like this. The aliens had superior technology, but they were far from home. Humanity had nowhere left to retreat. This was their world, and they would defend it with everything they had. The war for Earth had begun, and the Vrethians had no idea what they had awakened. 3 weeks after the first drone landing, the Vrethian Empire established its first permanent ground installation on Earth. They chose a location in Siberia, far from major population centers, where the frozen tundra seemed to offer little resistance. The base was a collection of prefabricated structures surrounded by energy barriers, with landing pads for transport craft and housing for 200 Vrethian personnel. Commander Vesh oversaw the base personally. He walked through the corridors with confidence, reviewing status reports on a holographic display that floated beside him. The mining operations were proceeding on schedule. Resistance from the local humans had been minimal. A few scattered attacks with primitive firearms that bounced harmlessly off Vrethian armor. Nothing that concerned him. "Commander," one of his officers reported, "we've lost contact with Patrol Unit 7. Vesh frowned. When? 40 minutes ago. They were conducting a perimeter sweep 3 kilometers north of the base. Send a recovery team. The recovery team found the patrol an hour later. What they discovered made even experienced Vrethian soldiers hesitate. The 4-member patrol had been ambushed on a narrow trail through the snow. Simple explosive devices hidden beneath the snow had disabled their armor's power systems. Then the humans had attacked with close-range weapons. The scene was brutal and efficient. But what disturbed the recovery team more was what they found near the bodies. A camera still recording and a sign written in Vrethian script. The sign read, "Welcome to Earth." The footage was transmitted back to the base and eventually to the Vrethian flagship. Admiral Kethavar watched it in his command center, his 4 eyes focused intently on the screen. The ambush had been planned with precision. The humans had studied Vrethian patrol patterns, identified a vulnerable location, and executed an attack that exploited weaknesses in standard Imperial armor. "How did primitives learn our language?" Kethavar demanded. "We don't know, sir, but there's more." His intelligence officer brought up another file. "We've been monitoring Earth's communication networks. The humans are broadcasting their history to each other, military history. They call it lessons learned. Sir, you should review some of these files." Over the following days, Vrethian intelligence officers watched humanity's recorded history with growing unease. They saw wars that spanned continents and killed millions. They saw weapons of devastating power used without hesitation. They saw tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare as the Vrethians understood it. One officer watched footage from a conflict humans called World War II and immediately requested to speak with Admiral Kethavar. "Sir, this species has been at war with itself for its entire recorded history. They've developed thousands of ways to kill each other. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons. They've fought in every terrain type on their planet. And sir, they don't seem to have rules about civilian targets or proportional response." Kethavar dismissed the concern. "They're using psychological warfare, trying to intimidate us with historical footage. It won't work. Continue operations." But the attacks continued to escalate. A mining operation in the Congo went silent. When reinforcements arrived, they found the site destroyed, not by advanced weapons but by coordinated human tactics. The humans had cut power lines, disabled communications, then attacked from multiple directions using the jungle terrain to their advantage. Dozens of Vrethian personnel were dead or missing. In the Amazon, drones began disappearing. Small teams of humans would approach at night, disable the machines with electromagnetic pulse devices reverse-engineered from captured Vrethian technology, then strip them for parts before vanishing into the rainforest. A supply convoy moving through Southeast Asia was ambushed in a mountain pass. The humans used terrain to channel the Vrethian vehicles into a kill zone, then attacked with a combination of explosives, armor-piercing weapons, and cyber attacks that disabled vehicle targeting systems. The convoy was destroyed in less than 10 minutes. In underground facilities across Earth, human scientists worked around the clock. They dissected every piece of Vrethian technology they could capture. They studied the energy shields, the power systems, the weapons. What the Vrethians had assumed would take decades for a primitive species to understand, humans were decoding in weeks. Dr. Sarah Chen led a research team in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. She had traded her space station observation post for a laboratory filled with alien equipment. In front of her, a small Vrethian energy shield generator sat on a table, partially disassembled. "The principle is actually elegant," she explained to her team. "They're creating a localized distortion in electromagnetic fields. We've been approaching energy shields all wrong. We thought we needed exotic materials. We just needed to understand the math better." Her colleague, Dr. James Park, looked up from his workstation. "If we understand the math, can we build one?" "Better than that," Sarah said with a tired smile. "We can learn how to break theirs." The breakthrough came 6 weeks into the conflict. A special forces team operating in Brazil managed to disable a Vrethian drone's shields using a modified electromagnetic pulse device. The pulse was specifically tuned to disrupt the field generators based on data Dr. Chen's team had collected. When the shields failed, conventional weapons destroyed the drone easily. The footage of that success was transmitted to every resistance cell on Earth. Humanity finally had a way to fight back effectively. Admiral Kethavar convened an emergency meeting with his senior officers. The holographic display in the command center showed a map of Earth with red markers indicating attacks, losses, and disrupted operations. In the past 70 days, we've lost 43 mining drones, 12 ground installations, and over 300 personnel, Kethvar said, his voice hard. The humans are not behaving like any pre-FTL species we've encountered. They're coordinating globally, sharing intelligence, and adapting faster than we can respond. They're also using tactics we consider barbaric, Commander Vesh added. Booby traps, ambushes, attacking wounded personnel. They ignore every civilized rule of warfare. Perhaps, another officer suggested, we should review their rules of warfare. Surely they have some code of conduct. The intelligence officer who had studied human history spoke up. Sir, they have codes of conduct, treaties and conventions about warfare. The problem is they only seem to follow these rules when fighting each other. When they face an existential threat, they appear to abandon all restrictions. Kethvar stared at the map. Then we show them overwhelming force. Prepare a pacification operation. We'll deploy 5,000 troops to Southeast Asia. We'll crush their resistance cells and demonstrate the cost of defying the Empire. The pacification force landed in Thailand 3 weeks later. It was the largest Frethian military operation on Earth's surface, with advanced armor, gunships, and every technological advantage the Empire could provide. They expected to sweep through the region, eliminate resistance, and establish imperial authority. They walked into a nightmare. The humans had been preparing. They had studied every piece of intelligence about Vrethian tactics and equipment. They had set traps throughout the region, turned entire villages into defensive positions, and positioned forces where Vrethian technology would be least effective. The first indication that something was wrong came when the lead Vrethian units entered a valley that intelligence had marked as a resistance stronghold. The valley appeared abandoned. Scanners showed no significant human presence. The Vrethian commander ordered his forces to advance. The valley exploded. Buried explosives detonated in sequence, creating a chain reaction that caught the Vrethian column in a devastating kill zone. Gunships moved to provide air support, but were met with surface-to-air missiles that the humans had managed to modify to track Vrethian signatures. 3 gunships fell from the sky in the first 30 seconds. Then the humans attacked from concealed positions. They used the new shield-disrupting weapons alongside conventional firearms. Vrethian soldiers found their protective barriers failing at critical moments. Armor that should have protected them became prisons when their power systems were disabled by electromagnetic attacks. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Vrethian pacification force had lost nearly half its personnel. The survivors retreated in disorder, many of them experiencing psychological trauma that Vrethian medical officers struggled to treat. Commander Vesh filed his report from a field hospital, his voice shaking. They don't fight like a military force. They fight like the planet itself is trying to kill us. They appear from nowhere, strike and vanish. They use weapons we don't understand mixed with weapons we consider obsolete. They show no fear of death. Admiral, we're not fighting soldiers. We're fighting something I don't have words for. On Earth, the humans who had fought in that valley gathered in a hidden base. They were exhausted, some wounded, all of them aware of how many friends they had lost. But they had won. They had faced the Empire's best and survived. General Zhao addressed them via secured communication. What you did today echoes around the world. You proved we can fight them. You proved we can win. This war isn't over, but you've shown every human on Earth that we have a chance. In orbit, Admiral Kethvar stared at casualty reports and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. High Admiral Kethvar stood before the holographic display in his command center, watching Earth rotate slowly below. 4 months had passed since the Vrethian Empire had arrived, and the situation had deteriorated beyond anything he could have predicted. Ground operations had stalled. Every mining site required constant military protection. Every supply convoy needed armed escorts. The humans had transformed their entire planet into a battlefield. We're losing resources faster than we're extracting them, his logistics officer reported. The cost of maintaining operations on Earth now exceeds the value of the resources we're collecting. Then we change tactics, Kethvar decided. If we can't pacify the surface, we'll force them to surrender. Establish a total orbital blockade. Nothing gets in or out. Cut off their supply lines, their communications, everything. We'll starve them into compliance. The blockade began within days. Brethian ships took up positions around the planet, creating a net that nothing could pass through. They targeted satellites, destroying Earth's GPS systems, communication networks, and observation platforms. Any aircraft that flew too high was shot down. Ships that ventured too far from shore were sunk. For the first time since the war began, Earth was truly isolated. In the command bunker beneath Geneva, General Zhao received reports from around the world. The blockade was effective. International trade had stopped. Airlines were grounded. Coastal cities faced food shortages as fishing fleets stayed in port. The global economy was collapsing. How long can we sustain this? President Morrison asked during an emergency video conference. Months, maybe, Zhao replied honestly. We have stockpiles and we can produce food and basic supplies. But without global distribution networks, some regions will suffer badly. The Vrethians are betting we'll surrender before we starve. Will we? She asked. Zhao looked at the faces on the screens around him. Leaders from dozens of nations, all of them exhausted, all of them determined. No, Madam President. We won't. We'll adapt. That's what we do. The adaptation began immediately. Humanity moved underground. Cities around the world began massive excavation projects. Using everything from advanced boring machines to simple hand tools, millions of people dug deep into the earth. They created underground farms lit by artificial light. They built subterranean factories and living spaces. They moved critical infrastructure where Vrethian orbital weapons couldn't reach it. In Beijing, an entire district relocated to a complex of tunnels beneath the city. In New York, the subway system expanded into a vast underground metropolis. In rural areas, people dug shelters and connected them with tunnels that stretched for miles. The Vrethians watched from orbit with growing frustration. They're burrowing, Commander Vesh reported with disbelief, like animals. We've never encountered a species that responds to orbital blockade by moving underground. How deep are they going? Kethvar asked. Some of the facilities are more than a kilometer beneath the surface, too deep for our orbital weapons to target effectively. Kethvar felt his frustration building. Then we'll send ground forces to root them out. Sir, our ground forces are already overstretched. Every unit we send to the surface takes casualties. The humans have an entire planet to hide in, and they're using every meter of it. While humanity dug deeper, a small team of scientists and engineers worked on a different kind of solution. In a hidden facility in the Australian outback, Dr. Sarah Chen led a project that most people considered impossible. They were building a faster-than-light spacecraft using a combination of captured Vrethian technology and human engineering. The Vrethian FTL drive works on principles we're only beginning to understand, Sarah explained to her team. But we don't need to understand everything. We just need to make it work once. The ship they built was ugly and crude. It was constructed from parts of 3 different Vrethian vessels, held together with human-manufactured components and, in some places, literally welded together. Engineers called it the Frankenstein. Test pilots called it the Death Wish, but after 6 weeks of round-the-clock work, it was ready. This thing will probably kill us, Colonel Jake Morrison said, looking at the ship. He was a test pilot with 20 years of experience, and he had never seen anything that looked less airworthy. Probably, Sarah agreed. But if it works, even for a few hours, we can prove humans can reach the stars. We can find the Vrethian homeworld. We can show them they're not safe either. The launch took place on a moonless night. The ship lifted off from a hidden runway using conventional rocket engines. Vrethian sensors detected the launch, but they had stopped worrying about individual aircraft weeks ago. Too many decoys, too many false alarms. By the time the Vrethians realized what was happening, the Frankenstein had reached the edge of Earth's atmosphere. Sarah Chen, monitoring from the ground, held her breath as Colonel Morrison activated the FTL drive. The ship vanished. For 3 seconds, every sensor on Earth and in orbit lost track of it. Then it reappeared 30,000 kilometers away, far beyond the Vrethian blockade. It worked, Sarah shouted, and her entire team erupted in celebration. Colonel Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system. I'm alive, which is honestly surprising. The jump was rough, but the ship held together, heading to secondary coordinates. Aboard the Vrethian flagship, alarms blared. Admiral Kethvar stared at sensor readings that shouldn't be possible. A human ship just achieved FTL travel, his sensor officer reported, his voice filled with shock. Sir, that's impossible. They're a pre-FTL species. Apparently not anymore, Kethvar said quietly. Track that ship. Find out where it's going. Colonel Morrison piloted the Frankenstein through 3 more jumps, each one taking him farther from Earth. His orders were specific. He was to find the Vrethian home system, confirm its location, and transmit the data back to Earth. He wasn't expected to survive the mission. On the 4th jump, his sensors detected a massive concentration of Vrethian ships and installations. He had found it. The heart of the Vrethian Empire. Morrison recorded everything his sensors could detect, then programmed the ship's computer to transmit the data in a tightly compressed burst. As the transmission sent, Vrethian ships began converging on his position. Earth, this is Deathwish, he transmitted, using the ship's nickname. Mission accomplished. Package delivered. I'm going to see how much damage one crazy human in a broken ship can do. Tell my family I love them. He aimed the Frankenstein at the nearest Vrethian installation and activated the FTL drive one last time. The ship materialized inside the installation's shield perimeter, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The collision released as much energy as a small nuclear weapon. The installation and everything within 5 kilometers was vaporized instantly. On Earth, the transmission from Colonel Morrison arrived and was immediately distributed to every command center. For the first time, humanity knew where their enemy came from. They knew where the Vrethians lived. The balance of terror had shifted. President Morrison addressed the United Earth Council that evening. The Vrethians came to our world thinking we were helpless. They've learned differently. Now we know where they live. I'm authorizing the construction of 20 more FTL-capable vessels, not for exploration, for war. In orbit, Admiral Kethvar received emergency communications from the High Council. The attack on the installation had killed thousands of Vrethian civilians. Panic was spreading through the Empire. How had humans, primitives who couldn't even leave their own planet a year ago, reached the core systems? The High Council is demanding answers, his communication officer reported. They want to know if we can protect the homeworld. Kethvar had no good answers. The humans had just demonstrated they could strike anywhere in Vrethian space. Meanwhile, his forces on Earth were bleeding resources and personnel daily. The blockade was hurting humanity, but it wasn't breaking them. Send a message to Earth Command, Kethvar ordered. Increase orbital bombardment. Target their underground facilities. I want them to understand that continued resistance will only bring more death. The bombardment intensified. Vrethian ships began targeting population centers with kinetic strikes. Massive rods of dense metal accelerated from orbit, striking with the force of tactical nuclear weapons. Cities were hit. Underground facilities collapsed. Tens of thousands died in the attacks, but humanity didn't surrender. Instead, they adapted again. Engineers developed new sensor systems that could detect incoming kinetic strikes seconds before impact, giving people time to reach deeper shelters. Construction crews dug redundant tunnels and distributed critical facilities. Medical teams developed protocols for treating mass casualties. And in secret facilities around the world, the new fleet of human FTL ships neared completion. General Zhao stood in one of those facilities, watching workers put final touches on a vessel that looked slightly more elegant than the Frankenstein, but not by much. How many people can we evacuate if this gets worse? He asked Sarah Chen, who stood beside him. Each ship can carry maybe 200 people, she replied. With 20 ships, we can save 4,000 people per trip. It's not much, it's something, Zhao said. If Earth falls, at least some of us will survive. And will. The Vrethian High Council made their decision after 6 months of war. Earth was costing the Empire too much in resources, personnel, and political stability. Other species within the Empire were watching nervously, wondering if they might be next if they displeased their masters. The Council decided that humanity needed to be crushed completely, a demonstration of imperial power that would discourage future rebellions. Commit 60% of the Imperial fleet to Earth, High Counselor Vren ordered. Not just to blockade, but to invade. We will eliminate organized resistance, establish permanent control, and show the galaxy that the Empire cannot be defied. Admiral Kethvar received his orders with mixed feelings. Part of him welcomed the additional forces. Part of him remembered every lesson the humans had taught him over the past months. But he was a loyal officer of the Empire, and he would follow his orders. The invasion fleet arrived at Earth over the course of 2 weeks. Nearly 300 warships took up positions in orbit. 100,000 Vrethian troops prepared for planetary assault. It was the largest military operation in the Empire's recent history. "We'll begin with simultaneous strikes on 6 continents," Kethvar explained to his officers. "We'll target every major population center, every military installation we've identified, and every industrial facility. The humans will be overwhelmed by the scale of our attack." Commander Vesh studied the invasion plans with a growing sense of unease. "Sir, the humans have been unusually quiet for the past 3 weeks. Our intelligence suggests they've been evacuating major cities." "Good," Kethvar replied. "It will make occupation easier." "Or it's a trap," Vesh said quietly. The invasion began at dawn across 6 continents. Vrethian dropships descended through the atmosphere in massive waves. Soldiers in advanced combat armor landed in cities that had been subjected to months of orbital bombardment. They expected fierce resistance. Instead, they found ghosts. New York City was empty. The streets were deserted, buildings abandoned. No civilians, no military forces, no signs of life. A Vrethian battalion commander walked through Times Square, his 4 eyes scanning for threats. His sensors detected nothing but empty buildings. "This doesn't feel right," he transmitted to his command ship. The building beside him exploded. Across the planet, the pattern repeated. The humans had abandoned their cities, but they had turned them into massive death traps. Every building was rigged with explosives. Every street had hidden mines. Every tunnel and subway system was a kill zone. In London, a Vrethian company advanced through the financial district. The streets appeared clear until they reached an intersection. Underground explosives detonated simultaneously, creating a crater 30 meters wide. As the survivors scrambled for cover, automated weapon systems activated from hidden positions. Rail guns that humans had reverse-engineered from Vrethian technology tore through armor and shields. In Beijing, Vrethian forces entered the underground complexes they had detected from orbit. The tunnels seemed to go on forever, branching and connecting in impossible patterns. Units got separated. Communication broke down. Then the attacks began from the darkness. Human soldiers who had trained for months in tunnel warfare emerged from concealed positions, struck with devastating efficiency, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. In Mumbai, São Paulo, Cairo, and Sydney, the same nightmare unfolded. The cities themselves had become weapons, and the Vrethian invasion force was taking casualties at an alarming rate. Commander Vesh stood in the command center of a landed carrier, watching casualty reports flood in. "We've lost contact with 12 battalions. 23 more are reporting heavy casualties. Sir, the humans are using the cities against us. Every building is a trap. Every street is an ambush site. Pull forces back to secured perimeters," Kethvar ordered. "We'll level the cities from orbit if we have to." But the orbital bombardment created its own problems. Destroying buildings filled with traps meant massive explosions that threatened nearby Vrethian forces. The rubble created new defensive positions that humans could use for cover, and for every city the Vrethians destroyed, humanity's resistance seemed to grow more fierce. In the Australian outback, far from the main invasion sites, Dr. Sarah Chen watched as the 20th human FTL ship prepared for launch. The vessels were loaded not with evacuees but with soldiers and weapons. Each ship had a specific target in Vrethian space. "We're ready," the ship captain reported. Sarah nodded. "Then it's time to show them that two can play at this game. Launch when ready." The human fleet jumped away from Earth, leaving no trace of their departure. Their destinations were Vrethian supply depots, communication relays, and lightly defended colony worlds. The strategy was simple. While the Empire committed its forces to Earth, humanity would strike at the heart of Vrethian territory. The first strike hit a mining colony in the Varath system. The human ship jumped in, launched every weapon it carried at the colony's infrastructure, and jumped away before the defending ships could respond. 50,000 Vrethian civilians were suddenly stranded without life support or communication. The second strike targeted a major supply depot that serviced the fleet at Earth. One human ship, loaded with explosives, jumped directly into the depot's main warehouse. The resulting explosion destroyed enough supplies to sustain the invasion force for 3 months. Strike after strike followed. Human ships appeared from nowhere, caused massive damage, and vanished. Some were destroyed by Vrethian defenses, some survived to strike again. But every attack forced the Empire to divert resources from Earth to protect their own territory. In a hidden laboratory beneath the ruins of Tokyo, a different kind of weapon was being prepared. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto led a team of biologists and weapons specialists who had spent months studying Vrethian physiology. They had dissected bodies recovered from battlefields. They had analyzed blood samples and tissue, and they had created something terrible. It's a virus specifically designed for Vrethian biology, Kenji explained to General Zhao via encrypted communication. It spreads through airborne transmission, has a 72-hour incubation period, and a 90% mortality rate. That's a weapon of mass destruction, Zhao said quietly. Yes. But they're trying to exterminate us, General. We're fighting for survival. The question is, are we willing to do whatever it takes? The decision went to the United Earth Council. President Morrison sat in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, listening to arguments from dozens of world leaders. Some advocated immediate use of the bioweapon. Others called it a violation of human ethics. The debate raged for hours. Finally, Morrison called for a vote. We're facing extinction. The Vrethians have shown no mercy, no willingness to negotiate, no consideration for human life. I believe we should use every weapon at our disposal. But this decision belongs to all of us. The vote was close, but it passed. The bioweapon would be deployed. Vrethian soldiers on Earth began reporting illness 3 days later. At first it seemed like minor symptoms. Fatigue, fever, respiratory problems. Medical officers treated it as a local infection, probably from Earth's biosphere. But the illness spread rapidly, jumping from soldier to soldier despite quarantine protocols. Within a week, Vrethian forces across the planet were reporting the same plague. Within 2 weeks, 10% of the invasion force was dead. Within 3 weeks, it was 40%. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Kethvar stared at medical reports with horror. Where did this come from? Genetic analysis suggests it was engineered, his medical officer reported, her voice shaking. Sir, the humans created this. It's designed specifically to kill us. Pull all forces back to orbit, Kethvar ordered immediately. Full quarantine protocols. No one goes to the surface. No one. But the damage was done. The invasion force had been crippled. Vrethian soldiers who had survived months of human ambushes and booby traps were dying from an invisible enemy. Morale collapsed. Units refused to deploy. Some soldiers attempted to desert, though there was nowhere to go. Commander Vesh entered the Admiral's quarters without announcement. He looked exhausted, his 4 eyes dull with fatigue. Sir, we've lost this war. We have the superior force, Kethvar protested, though his voice lacked conviction. No, sir. We have superior technology, but the humans have something we don't. They have their entire planet. They have nowhere to retreat. They'll do anything to survive, including things we would never consider. They've turned their world into a trap, created diseases to kill us, and struck at our home systems. Meanwhile, we're thousands of light years from reinforcement, and we've lost 40,000 troops to a planet that was supposed to be a simple harvest operation. Kethvar sat heavily in his command chair. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly see the situation. The invasion had failed. The blockade was failing. Human ships were attacking Imperial territory, and his forces were dying from a plague with no cure. What do you recommend? He asked quietly. Withdrawal, immediate and complete. We cut our losses and report to the High Council that Earth is not worth the cost. They'll court-martial me. The Council ordered complete conquest. Better court-martial than death, sir, because if we stay here much longer, the humans will kill us all. On Earth's surface, in the ruins of cities and the depths of underground bunkers, humans celebrated their victories. They had paid a terrible price. 3 months after the Vrethian withdrawal from Earth, the human exodus began in earnest. Not everyone left. Millions chose to stay and rebuild their scarred homeworld. But millions more boarded the growing fleet of human vessels, refugees with technical skills, military training, and an unquenchable desire for vengeance. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the cargo bay of a converted Vrethian transport ship, watching families board with their meager possessions. She had helped build the human FTL program from nothing. Now she commanded a fleet of 37 vessels, a mixture of captured Vrethian ships and human-built hybrids. It wasn't much compared to an interstellar empire, but it was enough to begin. "Where are we going?" a young girl asked her mother as they walked past Sarah. The mother hesitated, then answered honestly, Away from Earth. Somewhere we can be safe. Somewhere we can start again. But Sarah knew the truth. They weren't just running away. They were preparing to fight back. The human fleet's first destination was a small system the Vrethians had marked as uninhabited. It had resources, breathable atmosphere on 2 moons, and most importantly, it was far from major Imperial shipping lanes. Within weeks, the humans had established a hidden base. They called it New Haven, though some of the soldiers jokingly referred to it as Hell's Kitchen. General Zhao arrived on one of the later transports, bringing with him the best of Earth's military command. He stood in the main dome of New Haven, looking out at the construction crews working around the clock to build facilities. "We have a choice to make," he told the assembled commanders. "We can hide here, try to survive, maybe eventually find a way to negotiate peace with the Vrethians, or we can make them regret they ever found Earth." Colonel Ana Santos, one of the few survivors of the first fighter engagement with Vrethian drones, spoke up. "What are you suggesting, General?" "War," Zhao said bluntly. "Not defensive war, offensive war. We know where they live. We know where their colonies are. We know where they mine resources and process materials. We hit them everywhere, constantly, until they beg for peace." "That's terrorism," another officer protested. "No," Zhao corrected. "That's asymmetric warfare. It's how a small force defeats a larger one. We can't match the Empire ship for ship or soldier for soldier, but we can make every system they control a battlefield. We can make them pay in blood and resources for every day they refuse to negotiate." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would go on the offensive. The campaign began with careful reconnaissance. Human ships, small and stealthy, mapped Vrethian territory. They identified vulnerable targets, mining colonies with minimal defenses, supply convoys traveling predictable routes, communication relays that connected distant parts of the Empire. The first raid hit a processing facility in the Kevtar system. 3 human ships jumped in, destroyed the facility with missile strikes, and jumped away before Vrethian defenders could respond. 200 Vrethian workers died in the attack. The second raid targeted a civilian transport carrying colonists to a new settlement. The human ships disabled the transport, boarded it, and took detailed scans of every Vrethian aboard before leaving them alive but stranded. The message was clear: nowhere is safe. Admiral Kethavar, now assigned to Homeland Defense after his failure at Earth, received reports of the human attacks with growing alarm. He stood before the High Council, trying to explain how a defeated enemy had become a persistent threat. "They're not behaving rationally," he told the Council. "They target civilian facilities as readily as military ones. They use captured Imperial ships, making identification difficult. And they have nothing to lose. No homeworld to defend, no economy to protect. They're refugees with warships." High Counselor Vren leaned forward. "You said they were primitives. You said Earth would be a simple harvest operation. Instead, you've unleashed a plague across the Empire. Species we've controlled for decades are now questioning Imperial authority, and these humans are making fools of our military. Fix this, Admiral, or face consequences." Kethvar left the council chambers knowing his career, possibly his life, depended on stopping the human threat. But how did you fight an enemy who had no fixed positions, no supply lines you could cut, and no regard for the conventions of civilized warfare? Meanwhile, the human attacks escalated. A Vrethian colony on the edge of Imperial space woke to find their orbital defenses destroyed, and a message painted across their main building in Vrethian script: "Remember Earth." A supply convoy disappeared between systems. When searchers found the debris, they discovered the convoy had been captured intact. The humans had stolen the ships, supplies, and equipment, adding to their growing fleet. A major communication relay, responsible for coordinating fleet movements across 3 sectors, exploded without warning. The sabotage was traced to human infiltrators who had somehow obtained Vrethian identities and accessed secure facilities. In the hidden shipyards of New Haven, humanity's industrial capacity began to show its true potential. Human engineers had finally cracked the secrets of Vrethian manufacturing. They began producing their own ships, not copies of Vreithian designs, but hybrid vessels that combined the best of both species' technology. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the first truly human-designed FTL warship roll out of the assembly building. It was sleek and angular, covered in the matte black material that humans favored for stealth operations. It was smaller than Vreithian cruisers but faster and more maneuverable. "She's beautiful," the ship's captain said. He was Commander David Park, Sarah's colleague from the early days of the FTL program. "What are we calling her?" "The Vengeance," Sarah replied. It seemed appropriate. The Vengeance and her sister ships began operations within a month. Unlike captured Vreithian vessels, these ships were designed for hit-and-run tactics. They could jump into a system, strike multiple targets with coordinated attacks, and escape before defenders could respond effectively. The psychological impact on the Vreithian Empire was devastating. Civilians who had never worried about security now lived in fear. Military forces were stretched thin, trying to protect hundreds of systems against an enemy that could strike anywhere. The Empire's economy began to strain under the cost of the war. Other species within the Empire watched these events with great interest. If humans could resist imperial authority, perhaps others could as well. Whispers of rebellion began in the outer colonies. The Vreithians found themselves fighting not just humans, but the idea of human resistance. 1 year after leaving Earth, the human fleet had grown to over 100 ships. New Haven had expanded into a full-fledged colony with farms, factories, and a population approaching 50,000. More refugees arrived weekly from Earth, bringing skills and determination. General Zhao stood in the command center of the fleet's flagship, studying a map of Vreithian space. Red markers indicated successful human attacks. Yellow markers showed Vreithian military concentrations. Blue markers were potential targets. "We've done more damage than I thought possible," Commander Ana Santos said, standing beside him. "But we're still a tiny force compared to the Empire. Can we actually win this war?" "Define winning," Zhao replied. "Can we conquer the Vreithian Empire? No. Can we make them regret attacking Earth? Yes. Can we force them to negotiate? That's what we're about to find out." He pulled up a new target on the display. It was a Vreithian world called Vresh Prime, the administrative capital of the Empire's economic sector. It wasn't the homeworld, but it was important. Hitting it would send a message impossible to ignore. "We're going to attack Vresh Prime," Zhao announced. "Not to destroy it. We're going to cripple their infrastructure, show them we can reach their core worlds, and broadcast a message to every species in the Empire. The message is simple. The Vreithian Empire is not invincible." The attack on Vresh Prime involved 20 ships and over 3,000 personnel. It was the largest human military operation since leaving Earth. The fleet jumped into the system, in perfect coordination, appearing at 6 different points around the planet simultaneously. Vreithian defenses responded immediately, but they were designed to repel a conventional attack from a few directions. The humans struck from multiple vectors at once, targeting orbital facilities, ground installations, and military bases. There would be avoided civilian centers but made sure their presence was impossible to miss. The battle lasted 40 minutes. In that time, human forces destroyed 3 orbital shipyards, disabled the primary communication hub, and struck the military command center with precision missile attacks. Then they withdrew, leaving behind a stunned population and a system in chaos. But more importantly, they left behind a message. It was broadcast on every channel, in every language used in the Empire. The message was simple. General Zhao appeared on screen, his expression hard, but composed. "People of the Vreithian Empire, we are humanity. You invaded our world. You tried to destroy us. You killed millions of our people. We want peace but not surrender. We want justice. We want the Vreithian Empire to acknowledge what they did and pay for the damage. Until that happens, we will continue to fight. We will strike your worlds as you struck ours. We will show you the same mercy you showed us, which is to say, none at all.